All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a big one, a question that's been around forever. Why did some societies end up with so much more stuff, material wealth and technology?
Well, it's a question that a New Guinean politician named Yali posed to Jared Diamond.
Oh, yeah, in his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Exactly. And we're going deep into some excerpts you shared to see how Diamond answered it.
It's such a fascinating book. And Diamond, he doesn't mess around. He goes right for those common assumptions about, like, racial superiority.
Right, or saying, oh, some groups are just inherently more intelligent than others. Diamond throws those out the window right away.
Yeah, I love that. He even suggests that New Guineans, because of their super demanding environment, they might actually have a cognitive edge.
Yeah, flips the whole thing on its head, right? So you're left thinking, okay, if it's not about being smarter, then what is it?
And that's where Diamond throws in that incredible story of the Spanish conquest of the Inca. I mean, Pizarro and his conquistadors taking down an army of 80,000 Inca.
Cajamarca. Talk about a mismatch.
It's wild.
But that's what a slight edge in technology can get you.
It really shows you how those little differences, they can have such a huge impact.
The Spanish had horses, they had steel weapons, armor. The Inca had, well, clubs, slings.
Oh, and the element of surprise. I mean, they had never seen anything like the Spanish before.
No, absolutely not.
But it makes you think, like, how did those differences even come about in the first place?
That's where Diamond's argument gets really interesting. He takes us all the way back to the dawn of agriculture.
Okay, so he's saying that farming is key.
Food production. That's the critical turning point.
Got it.
Cultivating crops, domesticating animals. When societies figured that out, well, suddenly they had food surpluses.
Which frees up people to do other things, right?
Absolutely. People could specialize.
Like become blacksmiths, develop new technologies, build more complex societies.
Yeah, exactly. So whoever figured out farming first, they had a massive advantage.
But I'm guessing it wasn't just about being first, right? Location must played a role too.
Oh, absolutely. Diamond, he focuses a lot on the Fertile Crescent.
Oh yeah, Southwest Asia.
Perfect place for early agriculture.
Yeah.
Its climate, that Mediterranean climate, wet winters, dry summers.
Right, it favors those plants that can handle a dry spell,
Mm-hmm.
which is what you want if you're trying to cultivate something.
And you've got those large seeded grasses there, wheat and barley, highly nutritious.
So great climate, perfect crops. Sounds like a winning combination.
It really was. But then there's the plants themselves, right?
Yeah, were some just easier to work with than others.
Oh, for sure. Early humans, they weren't doing genetic engineering or anything. They just picked the best seeds, the ones that sprouted quickly, produced a lot, didn't fall apart.
So they were basically guiding evolution without even knowing it.
Exactly. And over time, they ended up domesticating those crops that we rely on today.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. So you're saying that wheat and barley, they're kind of easy mode for early agriculture.
In a way, yeah, they gave those societies a head start. But later on, crops like apples or pears, they were much trickier.
Oh, I can see that.
Even like the shape of a plant's flowers can make a difference in how useful it was for humans.
So even these tiny biological differences, they could end up having massive historical consequences.
It's amazing, right?
This is so cool. But okay, I have to ask about animals. Why do we have cows and pigs, but not like zebras pulling plows?
Raman tackles that too.
Does he really?
Oh yeah, he breaks it down. There are 5 things an animal needs to be domesticable. Its diet, how fast it grows, how it breeds, its personality, and how it reacts to danger.
Okay, so that makes sense. So zebras, what's wrong with them?
Temperament. They're kind of nasty, don't do well being kept.
That's too bad.
And then you have the vicuña in the Andes. Amazing wool. But their mating rituals, way too elaborate for a pen.
Oh, wow.
Some animals, like cheetahs, they just won't breed in captivity.
Huh. So it's not just us forcing animals into this lifestyle. Some of them are just not cut out for it.
No, they're not. But, this brings up another aspect of our relationship with animals. Germs.
Uh-oh. The not so fun part.
Right. So as Eurasians were living with their livestock, they were exposed to all these diseases, building up immunity.
And then when they encountered other populations,
Who hadn't been exposed.
it was devastating.
Exactly. It became a hidden weapon, unintentionally.
It's like while they were building these technologies and societies, they were also accidentally building up a biological advantage.
Yeah, you could say that. And to understand how those germs spread, we need to look back at geography.
Okay, here we go again.
Diamond talks about continental axes, how the shape of a continent impacts the spread of crops, animals' ideas even.
Wait, so you're telling me that a map could explain why some societies thrived and others didn't?
Think about Eurasia, east-west axis. Crops, technologies, they spread easily across similar climates.
Right, like wheat just taking off across Eurasia.
And compare that to the Americas, north-south axis. Huge climate variations.
So corn, for example, it would have had a much harder time spreading from Mexico to the eastern U.S.
Much harder. And those differences, they had a big impact on how societies developed.
I'm starting to see how this all connects. It's amazing. But did he test his theory out on other continents? Like, to see if it holds up?
Absolutely. And Australia is a really interesting case.
Okay, Australia. Before Europeans arrived, they didn't have farming, herding, metal tools.
Not even bows and arrows.
Really?
Yeah.
So were they just stuck in the Stone Age? Or is there more to it?
Diamond says their environment had a lot to do with it.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. Not many plants and animals suitable for domestication in Australia.
Yeah, that's true. What's the biggest land animal there?
A kangaroo or a cassowary bird, probably.
Yeah, not exactly ideal for plowing fields or pulling carts.
No, not really. But they did find ways to manipulate their environment.
They did.
Yeah. They used fire. Diamond calls it fire stick farming.
Fire stick farm.
They burned the landscape on purpose to help certain plants and animals grow.
Wow, that's incredible. So they found a way to adapt to this challenging environment.
They did. But it didn't lead to the same kind of agricultural revolution that you see in other parts of the world.
So different environment, different path. But they still managed to survive for tens of thousands of years. That's impressive.
Oh, absolutely. It really makes you rethink those ideas of progress and civilization. And Diamond, he doesn't stop there. He takes us to New Guinea.
Oh, New Guinea. I read somewhere that it has like over 1,000 languages.
It does. It's amazing.
Mind-blowing.
It shows you how agriculture can develop independently. Unlike Australia, New Guinea, their highlands, they developed sophisticated agricultural systems.
So using locally domesticated plants.
Yeah, and it led to denser populations, specialized labor, more complex societies.
So two neighboring lands, totally different outcomes. Why? What made the difference?
Diamond points back to the same things we've been talking about. Environment, food production. New Guinea had all these domesticable plants, a head start that Australia just didn't have.
Right. But New Guinea also offers a really interesting contrast to what happened in the Americas.
You mean with the European colonization?
Yeah, the conquistadors arriving with their horses and guns, taking over these vast empires.
Exactly. In New Guinea, Europeans faced a different challenge. They weren't running into technologically inferior societies. They were encountering established agricultural societies, dense populations, and their own unique set of germs.
Hold on, you're saying that germs helped protect New Guinea from colonization?
Well, think about it. Europeans brought diseases like smallpox, measles. Those wiped out huge numbers of Native Americans.
Right,
But New Guineans, they had their own tropical diseases, malaria, things like that.
so Europeans weren't as invulnerable there.
It was a much more even playing field in terms of biology.
So a biological stalemate, that's fascinating.
It is. And it shows you how disease can shape history. But Diamond, he takes us even further. He takes us on a tour of Eurasia.
Eurasia, the birthplace of so many civilizations.
And he uses language to track the movement of people, the spread of culture.
Oh, that's interesting. How does he do that?
Well, one of the most amazing examples is the Austronesian expansion, a prehistoric migration that began on the coast of South China,
Okay.
and it spread all the way to Madagascar. They left their linguistic fingerprints all across Southeast Asia and the Pacific.
Wow, that's incredible. Imagine those ancient seafarers traveling such vast distances.
It wasn't just exploration, though. They brought their agriculture, their plants, and animals to new lands.
And that had a huge impact on the people they met, right?
Huge. Sometimes it led to displacement, even replacement of entire populations.
Wow. It's a reminder that even peaceful migrations can have these dramatic consequences.
Yeah, both cultural and biological. And Diamond, he points to the role of food production in all of this. Austronesian farmers, they had a big advantage over hunter-gatherer societies in places like Indonesia.
Because they already had their agricultural practices established.
Exactly. But when they ran into other farming societies, like in New Guinea, it was different. They couldn't displace those populations as easily.
So it wasn't just about technology, it was about how well their food systems fit into the new environment.
Exactly. But Diamond also uses language to explore another fascinating question. The origins of writing.
Oh, writing. That's a game changer. It completely transforms how societies function.
It does. And he argues that writing was only invented independently a handful of times. Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, maybe Egypt and China.
Really? Only a few times. Why so few?
Well, he says it's because writing systems are complex, difficult to develop. And once they're established, they tend to spread, influencing others.
So it prevents independent invention elsewhere, like a domino effect.
Yeah, kind of. He digs into the different writing systems too, how they evolved. From those early pictographs representing words or concepts, to syllabaries representing syllables, to the alphabet.
The alphabet. That must have been a huge leap.
It made writing much easier to learn, which helped literacy spread and led to more complex communication.
But I bet it wasn't always about practicality, right?
No, not always. Diamond points out that sometimes politics or religion were the driving forces. Rulers using writing to consolidate power, religious leaders using it to spread their doctrines.
It's a reminder that technology, even something as good as writing, can be used for all sorts of things.
Absolutely. But this brings up another big question. Why did some societies develop complex technologies while others didn't?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Diamond argues it's a mix of things, not just individual smarts, but also social and environmental conditions. He says societies with more people, more food surpluses, more connections with other societies.
They have an edge.
They do. More people, more ideas bouncing around. He even uses the example of the QWERTY keyboard.
Oh, interesting.
Shows how random events can impact technology.
Yeah, the QWERTY keyboard is a perfect example of that. But it's not just about size and connections, right?
No, it's also about the social and cultural environment, how receptive a society is to innovation.
So things like, what? Life expectancy,
Uh,
education systems.
Things like that, yeah. The presence of institutions that encourage learning, experimentation, cultural attitudes towards change.
Makes sense. Technology doesn't just appear out of thin air.
Exactly. And Diamond's argument, it goes beyond just physical technologies. He also looks at social technologies.
Social technologies, what does that mean?
The institutions, laws, customs, all the stuff that makes a society tick.
Oh, right. From those early hunter-gatherer bands to these big complex states.
He outlines the stages of that evolution.
Interesting.
He talks about how things like population density, food surpluses, the need to resolve conflicts and manage resources.
Those all played a role.
Yeah. He even gets into why people put up with rulers who take their wealth.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. Why do we tolerate that?
He compares those who are in it for themselves, the kleptocrats, with those who serve the common good, like statesmen.
Like Mobutu versus George Washington.
Exactly.
It's the age-old question, isn't it? Why do we put up with leaders who seem more interested in enriching themselves than actually serving us?
Well, Diamond says it's about that balance between self-interest and the good of the group. States, they provide those essential services that we can't do on our own.
Right. Things like defense, infrastructure, laws.
But then that also creates opportunities for those in power to, well, take advantage.
A delicate balance, for sure, and one that hasn't always worked out so well throughout history.
No, it hasn't. And Diamond stresses that this evolution of societies, it's not a straight line.
More of a winding path.
It's messy, complicated, environment, culture, all these factors playing a role.
So there's no single answer to why some societies became empires and others didn't.
Exactly. But okay, we've talked a lot about different societies. What about China? They had this long history of innovation, but ultimately they fell behind Europe.
That's a great point. How does Diamond explain that?
Well, he suggests that China's unity, its centralized rule, it was actually a double-edged sword. So at first, it was great for them, but eventually it kind of backfired.
How so?
Well, they didn't have that same drive for exploration, for pushing technological boundaries like you see in Europe.
Because Europe had all those competing states.
Exactly. In
Huh.
China, one emperor could just shut down entire fields of study, and there wasn't much incentive to take risks.
Because the rewards all went to the top.
Right. Think about Columbus. He had to go around to all these different European monarchs before he finally got someone to back his voyage.
Yeah, good point. He wouldn't have gotten anywhere in China.
No, probably not. And Diamond argues that these different political and social structures, they really shaped the destinies of these two regions.
So fascinating. But this is all ancient history, right? What about today? What does all this tell us about the inequalities we see in the world right now?
That's where Diamond's work gets really interesting. He's not saying it's about placing blame.
Okay, so what is he saying?
He's saying that we need to understand the roots of inequality. Recognize that the advantages some societies have today, they come from these long historical processes.
So it's not just about people working harder or being more innovative.
It's about recognizing that historical
And
context.
that context includes things like geography, the types of plants and animals they had access to, even those diseases from centuries ago.
Exactly. Diamond's challenging us to really think about those long-term consequences.
So it's not just a simple story of progress.
No, it's much more complicated than that, and it challenges a lot of those traditional narratives.
But does he offer any solutions? Or is he just kind of laying out the problem?
Well, he doesn't say he has all the answers, but he does want us to rethink our ideas about civilization and progress.
What do you mean?
He points out that a lot of societies that are labeled primitive or backward, they've actually come up with incredibly sophisticated ways of adapting to their environments.
So maybe progress means different things in different places.
Exactly. It's not about ranking cultures or imposing our own definitions of success.
It's about understanding all the different ways humans have found to thrive.
Right. But, Diamond's work has also sparked some debate.
Oh, yeah? What kind of debate?
Well, some people argue that he focuses too much on the environment and not enough on human agency.
So, like, the choices people make, how those can shape their future?
Yeah, that's one of the main criticisms. But Diamond, he does acknowledge the importance of choice.
Okay, so how does he see it?
He sees it as this interplay. The environment, it sets the stage, but human societies, they're the ones writing the script.
A script full of triumphs and tragedies.
Exactly. It's messy, complicated, and there's no easy answer for why things turned out the way they did.
So where does all this leave us? What's the takeaway from our deep dive into guns, germs, and steel?
Well, I think Diamond leaves us with a really big question.
What's that?
If history is shaped by all these things, the environment, culture, the choices we make, what will our chapter in this story look like? What will our contribution be?
That's a powerful question. It's like he's challenging us to really think about the world around us, question our assumptions, use our understanding of the past to build a better future.
Exactly. We're not just watching history unfold. We're part of it. And the choices we make today, they'll impact generations to come.
So it's up to us to make our mark.
That's right. Keep questioning, keep learning, keep exploring the world with a curious mind.
And keep diving deep.
Yeah, it's like being too successful can actually hold you back in the long run.
Wow, that's counterintuitive. But I guess it makes sense.
It does when you think about how those different political structures played out. China, with that one unified empire, they didn't have all that competition that was pushing Europe to innovate and explore.
It's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. If you don't have to change, you probably won't. And in China, well, the emperor had the final say. If he wasn't interested in something, that was it. End of story.
It makes you wonder how history might have unfolded differently if China hadn't been so unified.
It's one of those big what-if questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it really highlights how these seemingly subtle differences in how societies are organized, they can have a ripple effect across centuries.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about ancient history, about continental axes, about germs and steel. But what does all this have to do with us today? I mean, how does it help us understand the inequalities we see in the world right now?
That's the key question, isn't it? And I think Diamond is urging us to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
So not just focusing on the present moment.
Right. He's saying, let's look at those deep historical roots of inequality.
So it's not about blaming anyone or saying one group is inherently better than another.
No, it's about understanding that the advantages that some societies enjoy today, well, they often stem from historical processes that were shaped by factors largely beyond anyone's control.
Okay, I see what you mean. So like geography, right? Or
Yeah.
the availability of those domestical plants and animals, even the diseases that impacted populations centuries ago.
Exactly. And he's asking us to grapple with those long-term consequences. To recognize that history didn't just stop at some point. It continues to influence the world we live in today.
It's a perspective that really challenges some of those narratives we often hear about why certain countries are developed and others are not.
I think that's the point. Diamond is pushing us to dig deeper, to move beyond those simplistic explanations.
To look at the bigger picture, to recognize those historical legacies. But does he offer any solutions? I mean, it's one thing to lay out the problem, but is there anything we can do about it?
He doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but I think he's urging us to at least start asking the right questions, to question those assumptions we have about what constitutes progress or civilization.
So not just accepting things at face value. Like, what do we really mean when we say a society is advanced or developed?
Exactly. He points out that many societies that have been labeled primitive have actually developed incredibly sophisticated ways of adapting to their environments.
They might not have had steel or guns, but they found other ways to thrive.
Exactly. They display this incredible ingenuity, resourcefulness, and resilience. And he's saying, let's recognize and appreciate that diversity of experience. Let's not try to rank cultures or impose our own definitions of success on others.
So it's about broadening our understanding of what human progress can look like.
I think that's a big part of it. But Diamond's work hasn't been without its critics.
Really, what do people say?
Some argue that he overemphasizes those environmental factors. They say he doesn't give enough weight to human agency, to the choices people make.
So, like, he makes it sound like geography is destiny and there's no room for free will.
That's one way to put it. And while Diamond does acknowledge the power of those environmental influences, he also stresses that human societies aren't just passive players. It's not all predetermined.
Okay, so how does he reconcile those two things?
He sees it as this interplay, a kind of dance between the environment and human choices. He says the environment sets the stage, but it's up to humans to write the script.
A script that's full of twists and turns, unexpected plot developments.
Exactly. And that's what makes history so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It's messy, it's complex. There's no simple formula that explains everything.
But by studying history, by looking at those patterns and those deep connections, we can at least start to make sense of it all.
And maybe even learn from it, right?
So where does all this leave us? What's the big takeaway from Guns, Germs, and Steel?
I think Diamond leaves us with a powerful challenge, a question that each of us has to grapple with.
Okay, I'm ready. What is it?
If history is shaped by this interplay of environment, culture, and the choices we make, what will our chapter in this story look like? What mark will we leave on the world?
Wow, that's a heavy question. It really puts things in perspective. We're not just passive observers of history, we're active participants, and our choices matter.
Exactly. And that realization can be both daunting and empowering.
Right. Daunting because we know our decisions have consequences. Empowering because it means we have the ability to shape the future.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable world. And I think that's ultimately what Diamond is calling us to do, to take what we've learned from the past and use it to build a better future. So keep questioning, keep exploring, keep those minds open and curious, and remember, the deep dive never ends.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today.